So there is the problem. That is broken, but we can fix it. Okay, so yeah, believe it or not, I broke my Sprinter van. I think this is the first time I've shown this on the channel. This is my 2011 Mercedes Sprinter van. Little background on it. It's just I bought it as a basic cargo van but with windows. So just, the 2 seats up front. I'm slowly in the process of turning it into an RV, but mostly it's I've used it as a motorcycle hauler for back when I was a little more active with my off-road racing. It doesn't get used that much lately, but it's obviously a useful vehicle. So it was throwing a code. The check engine light was on. It was throwing an OBD code. I forget the exact code, but it was complaining something about a exhaust gas temperature sensor. So I did a little bit of research on it, and I found people talking about not the same code, but a similar code, and the resolution for that one was typically pull the sensors out and just clean them. And it showed, the videos I found on YouTube showed the location of 4 different sensors, and they said you pull them, you spray some brake cleaner in it, shoot it with some compressed air, and that'll usually fix the problem. So I started with the first one, and on the very first one, I broke it. Now, this was just me getting a little impatient. I showed at the top of the video, I showed where it's at. It's difficult to get in there. I should have taken some more time. The wrench was a little bit of an angle, so I wasn't really turning as much as I was kind of bending on it. And it's on an aluminum casting, and it just snapped right off. At first, I thought I had broken off the threads of the sensor inside of the part. It's part of the exhaust manifold. But then I found out, no, it's actually a stud on the manifold that broke off inside the sensor. So here you can see this is broken off. These are threads that come up out of the part on the van, and it broke off on there. So now the right way to fix this, of course, would be to either replace the part on the van or at least weld in a new fitting on it. We're going to try to take a shortcut. We're going to try some JB Weld. This stuff will work on anything. It's once again, this is not the right way to do it, but I got nothing to lose, because the other option is probably replacing that part of the manifold. It's actually a separate bolt-on part. It's not the whole exhaust manifold. I believe it's part of the EGR or something. So if this doesn't work, I'm not really out anything. If it does work, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper. Got my JB Weld mixed up. Not a whole lot of it, but it should be more than enough. I can put in a little more around it to seal it afterwards if I need to. Nice thing is, JB Weld's a slow set epoxy. It's not like that 5-minute stuff. The 5-minute epoxy is wonderful if you're in a hurry, but more often it's just going to harden, if you're doing anything specific or anything tricky with it. So now, I do want to avoid getting epoxy on the sensor part. I just want it up near the threads. So I think what I'm going to do is, rather than putting the epoxy on the manifold part, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the epoxy on the sensor and then slide it in. So we'll see how that works. Once again, this is not the way you should do this. I am not a licensed Mercedes Sprinter mechanic, but if somebody can learn from my mistakes, even better. Okay, that's kind of a big bloody mess, but I think that's going to work. You probably can't see that with my hand in the way, but so now we'll route the cable around here just to kind of hold it at the angle I want it. Oop, get my face in there. We'll see if that works. Once again, not the way you should do this, but you know, in a pinch, JB Weld does wonders. Well, the epoxy on the JB Weld there is setting. I've had it sitting for a few hours while I took care of a couple other things. So it's really got to stay, you know, overnight really before it's good, before I want to run the engine. But it looks like it's going to be sealed up in there pretty well. I may need to add a little bit more to seal it up. But anyway, that was just fixing what I broke while trying to fix the real problem. The real problem was it had a check engine light on with code P0546. And the description on my code reader was exhaust gas temperature signal high, I believe, or low. High, but that means it's set to high temperature, which is low voltage. So I did some research on that, and I found some YouTube videos showing where there's 4 different temperature sensors, and so and one of the things they recommend is sometimes the code they were talking about was a different one but related, and they said, you know, cleaning those sensors sometimes will fix the problem. So that's why I tried to do that, which broke it. And I realized, you know, I need to narrow things down a little bit better rather than just trying to pull sensors out. So I started unplugging just the cable on each one, and I tried each of those 4 separately, and they all raised completely different codes, or a similar type of code, but for a different sensor. That's when I realized that it isn't any one of those 4. So I did some research. I found out there's actually one that none of those videos told me about. And actually, when I looked up that code online, it specifically said that for the 546 code, that was due to the temperature sensor leading, if it's a turbocharged engine, which this is, it's the temperature sensor leading into the turbo. And so I actually found a picture. This is on the back of the engine, the turbo. The exhaust would normally come out here down to the downpipe, and you can see there's a temperature sensor right there. This one's much harder to get at than all the others. So I can't quite get to the sensor, but I can get to where it's connected. So what I'm going to do is so basically there's really can only be 2 things. It's either the sensor's bad, in which case it's got to be replaced, or quite likely it's just a bad connection. I'm hoping it's a bad connection because I can reach where the connection is. I can't reach where the sensor is. So I'll show you where this connection is. So I've got the air cleaner removed and all the plumbing related to that, so you can see, you know, we can get right to the turbo. That sensor, it's back basically down here. I had taken this off briefly, and I really can't get a wrench onto it, but I could feel it, and I could trace the wire, and I found that, I don't know if you can see this, but I can get to the connector right here. So I'm going to pop that off and hook a multimeter on it, and we'll see if we get any signal on it. Okay, so these connectors are actually pretty easy. One nice thing about German vehicles is they actually do use really nice electrical connectors usually, once you figure out how they come apart. There's a little thing you pop up with the screwdriver, and this one's pretty tough to get my hands on. Oh, there it is. And that'll pop right out. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I've got it out. Now, the wires, or this plug here, goes to the sensor itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I've got some small pins I can put in there and hook up a multimeter. A couple paper clips would be perfect. Okay, a couple paper clips. These might be a little fat. Let's see if I can get these in here. Okay, yeah, those are going to fit. And I've got a couple wires with alligator clips, which makes hooking up the multimeter much easier. I just clip these on here. And clip them onto my multimeter leads. Okay, now I need to look up how many ohms this should have, but I need to figure out, I don't even know what range this is supposed to be in. Let me go check that. Okay, so this should be around 150 ohms, and I've got on the 200 ohm range, and it's like it's not even hooked up. Which to me says that that connection could be my paper clips are not making good enough connection. But I have a feeling there's a broken wire in the connection. Well, I was able to get a little bit of slack on here, and what I've done is I've attached these test leads. These actually pierce into the wire through the insulation. And I was able to hook my multimeter up to this. My hope was it was just the connector was bad, because if that was the case, I could cut the wires, splice it, probably just go with a different style connector altogether, since I don't know if I'd be able to find one just like this. Unfortunately, that's not, that doesn't really appear to make any difference. It's still not working. So I think I got to actually replace the sensor. I'm gonna remove that heat shield on the turbo again, and we'll see if we can get to it. In the meantime, I'll show you what I've got here. I don't remember where I bought these. I bought these years ago. But these are very useful. You can see, let's see if I can get it to where you can see. You pull this down, and then as you tighten this, there's this pin that pierces the wire, and then this just holds it in place. And then it's designed for a banana plug, but you can hook a multimeter or anything into there. Very useful for checking the wires with only putting a very tiny hole in it. If you own a German vehicle, you gotta have some of these. Every once in a while, they like to do this. You can see that if I can get it to focus, that is not a normal socket. It's a star drive. It's basically the inverse of a Torx head socket. For some reason, Germans like to use this in a few random places. I used to have an old BMW 525, which is when I bought these, which these are not real easy to find. I forget where I found these, but they have been very useful. And on this heat shroud, that is what they use. Don't know why. You could have used a normal bolt there, but they decided to use these strange star Torx head things. Well, I spent the last, I don't know how long I fiddled with this, but a little while, getting this off. This is a elbow that comes out of the back of the turbo. Basically, this just connects to the rest of the exhaust coming out of the turbo for the outlet. And I realized, once this is out of the way, I probably have a lot more room to get to that sensor. It looks like that's the case. I was a little leery to take this off because, you don't want to get so many things taken off the vehicle so that you can't drive it to somebody who actually knows how to fix it. But this actually wasn't that bad. And actually, I can show you that in case you need to do it. This is the bottom one, and you see you don't actually need to take the, get this to focus. You don't need to take the bolt out of the way out. The intention is it kind of rests on that. But basically it's these three bolts. There's a band clamp that goes around here, or a V-band clamp that holds it to the rest of the exhaust. It's those funky star head bolts again, so luckily I have those sockets. One other thing, be real careful when you're reaching around to the back. You can't see anything, so you're doing it by feel. And actually, when I was going for this bottom bolt, I actually got the wrong bolt because I realized I had all three out and it wasn't loose. Luckily I didn't bang on it too hard. But I had actually undone one that's part of the turbo inlet on the bottom. But if you look here, now that I can see how it is, there's an indentation here in the pipe that gives you enough room to get a socket in there. So if you feel for that, you'll definitely get the right one. So now that this is off, I think I can get that sensor out of there. And so that I don't break it, I even have the right tool for the job, I think. After breaking that first one, I went searching, and this is actually an oxygen sensor wrench, but it's a 17 millimeter, which is the size of the sensor, sort of like a crow's foot type of wrench, slotted so it can go over the cable. Hopefully I can get this in there and not break yet another one of these, because this one, I don't want to replace the turbo because I broke it. Success! I got it out. I didn't break anything, more importantly. It was a little tricky. My fancy new little tool, it was just too fat to get in there. So I tried using a regular 17 millimeter wrench, and carefully, since that's how I broke the last one. Then I realized I do have the proper tool for the job. Where did I put it? I guess I set it back in here. I do have a 17 millimeter line wrench. That's the right tool. Gets a good grip around it. You're not going to just round things off, because I felt it kind of slipping with just the regular end wrench. So now I just need to get another one of these. I'm sure nobody's got it in stock. Well, it's late Saturday now, so it'll be sometime next week. But at least I got things torn down. I think I can put it back together. I think my van will work again, and not have the check engine light on. The annoying thing is, it had nothing to do with how the van was running. It ran properly. This is just one of those things it uses to verify it is running properly. So it was running perfectly, but a sensor that verifies it's running perfectly didn't work. Very annoying, but I suppose that's what we need to have good emissions. So I'll be back to this next week.